Tonight, showdown in Switzerland.
As I said outside, I think it's always better to meet face to face.
President Biden and President Putin meet to tackle some big topics. The latest.
Will be considered by the Senate even if it does not have bipartisan support.
And how Democrats are preparing to sidestep Republicans in the push to pass new infrastructure legislation. Plus, a majority of American adults say they live by a biblical worldview, but new data differs. We break down the numbers. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A showdown on the world stage. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, the much-anticipated Switzerland summit between President Biden and Russia's President Putin is over. And now that it's done, President Biden says it's time for the real work to begin. The CBN White House correspondent Eric Phillips has been following today's face-off and meeting, and he joins us now with our top story. Eric?
You know, Jenna, what struck me most about this was the length of the meeting. It was scheduled to take up to 5 hours, but instead it took less than 3. Both leaders agree it was efficient, and they say it was time well spent.
From the outset, things appeared awkward as the two presidents sat for this uncomfortable-looking photo op. Still, both say when the cameras were off, the meeting turned substantive and productive. President Biden calling it good and positive, not strident even when they disagreed.
I told President Putin my agenda is not against Russia or anyone else. It's for the American people.
As for the first general appraisal, I think there was no hostility, quite the contrary. The talks were quite constructive.
Important boxes were checked during the summit. The two agreed they would once again welcome each other's ambassadors into their countries. On the idea of a prisoner swap.
There could be some compromise that we enter into between the Russian Foreign Ministry and the U.S. State Department. They will be working on it.
The two apparently gained some ground on the subject of cybersecurity, a key objective especially following recent ransomware attacks on the U.S. linked to criminals in Russia.
We agreed to task experts in both our countries to work on specific understandings about what's off limits and to follow up on specific cases.
Still, Putin projected a tone of denial after the meeting.
We know that there were cyber attacks on a pipeline company in the United States. We are encountering the same threats.
On the issue of human rights, the Russian president seemed most defensive, engaging in a string of whataboutisms where the U.S. is concerned, referencing the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Some people died, and one of the people that died, they were simply shot on the spot by the police, although they were not threatening the police with any weapons. In many countries, the same thing happens.
It's not about just going after Russia when they violate human rights. It's about who we are.
In the end, the two men were saying very kind words about each other. Putin saying that he could tell at first glance that President Biden is very constructive, balanced, and experienced. On whether or not the meeting was ultimately successful, though, Biden would only say, "We'll find out." Jenna.
And joining us now is Michael OHanlon, Senior Fellow and Director of Research at the Brookings Institution. Michael, welcome. Great to have you with us. So today, during President Biden's meeting with Vladimir Putin, he was looking to establish predictable and rational way forward. Will President Putin, Michael, ever be predictable?
Jenna, it's a good question. And I want to say in some ways, yes, because Putin's been around long enough that we have some sense of his worldview. And, of course, he takes pride in being unpredictable tactically, but not to make too much of Secretary of Defense Mattis's comment. But I think Putin agrees with Mattis that one should be strategically predictable, but tactically unpredictable. Look for clever new openings, like the little green men seizing Crimea in 2014, or Russian airplanes flying into Syria on the side of President Assad in 2015. Those sorts of things, Putin always wants to keep us guessing, keep us on our back foot, et cetera. But his worldview is about enhancing Russian power, especially in the part of the world where he thinks Russia has its greatest prerogatives and traditions, Eastern Europe through the Middle East especially. And his worldview is about wanting to be one of the 3 or 4 or 5 big players on the world stage on really all global decision making. And certainly he's what we would call in the United States a defense hawk and values military power as well as nuclear capability. He's also a bit of a Russian nationalist in the sense, well, in every sense, but especially in regard to wanting Russia's economy to be partly resilient and independent of dependencies on others. And so some of the sanctions we impose on him, he regrets. Some of them he doesn't regret so much because it forces Russia to depend more on itself and not become too integrated into the global economy. These basic elements of his worldview, I think, are well established. And he also thinks, if I could add one more point, he also thinks that we try to interfere in Russian politics so consistently that he has every right to try to interfere in our politics, whether it's with disinformation campaigns or cyber hacking or Russian trolls. And one last thing, he's a KGB operative by background. So if there are Russian cyber hackers that he can pretend to be separate from, distanced from, not in control of, even though they're bringing down our gas pipelines and our gasoline pipelines and everything else, he may just play a game of obfuscation. Even though he's not really fooling anybody, he maintains enough room for maneuver in that kind of a realm to keep the pressure on us in cyber from hacking and from theft and other things as well. So all these aspects of Putin, I don't think really are going to change. And the only question, as you say, is sort of predicting his tactical next move. That's harder. But his worldview is well established.
Yeah. See, the White House, they set a pretty low bar going into today's meeting. We know they discussed cyber attacks, human rights, crossing red lines. But, Michael, do you think any change will come out of this summit?
Well, it's interesting. We see the initial headlines from the Putin press conference being that he sees productive opportunity for collaboration on cybersecurity. So there's 2 ways to interpret that. One is that he's being cynical. And again, he can always claim that he's not in charge of Russian hackers. And we all know that's not really true, but he can say it and at least half convince himself. The other is that he may actually be willing to hold out a tiny glimmer of cooperation on this issue to see if Biden will concede anything anywhere else on any other issue. And also, of course, it's an area where he can retract his offer. If all he's saying is there's some potential for cooperation in the future on clamping down on hackers, he can always engage in those conversations and then later basically change his mind if we think that we're trying to, bring Ukraine into NATO or do something else that he doesn't like. So it's possible that in a very cynical, tough-minded way, he is potentially offering this one area of collaboration, even though we know full well that he's not going to collaborate on most issues, and he's always going to view himself as being in competition with the United States in a broader sense.
All right. A lot of news out of Switzerland this evening. Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institution, we appreciate you joining us to help us break it all down. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
Meanwhile, Democrats are moving forward on their 2 different paths for an infrastructure bill, one with Republican support and one without. This comes as the White House is giving a bipartisan group of 10 senators 1 more week to strike a deal that can pass both chambers of Congress. Here now for more on these ongoing negotiations, CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, where do things stand tonight?
Well, Jenna, for years, both sides have expressed interest in coming up with working together to come up with a comprehensive infrastructure bill. The problem is, like with many issues, they can't seem to agree on the details. Now, while there is a bipartisan group working to find a solution, some of their colleagues are skeptical.
This is as clear as day. No climate, no deal.
Senator Ed Markey says it's time for Democrats to go their own way.
We cannot let Republican calls for bipartisanship deny the American people the climate action that they have been demanding.
Senator Susan Collins, one of the 10 senators negotiating the bipartisan plan, says their bill is focused on traditional infrastructure.
Roads, bridges, airports, seaports, waterways, highways, broadband, and I think that makes sense.
The plan would cost $1.2 trillion over 8 years. partly funded by repurposing COVID-19 relief money.
If you look at what has been spent, there literally is hundreds of billions of dollars in the pipeline going back to the initial CARES Act that was passed in March of last year.
If it passes, Democrats will then try to accomplish the rest of their agenda through a separate reconciliation bill, which only needs 50 votes.
A lot of my Democratic colleagues have made very clear to me, and I get it, that you can't count on their vote for this more traditional infrastructure package if there's not a second effort, which we call reconciliation.
Senator Mark Warner, who's also working on the infrastructure plan, says the reconciliation bill wouldn't be as aggressive as what President Biden laid out, but could include tax reform.
This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take on the challenge around climate change, and we would be irresponsible if we didn't take those actions.
Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is hopeful they'll move forward on an infrastructure plan that does two things.
Number one, does not revise the 2017 tax bill. Figure a way to credibly pay for it. Those are the only two things I'd like to see.
Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced this week that the Senate will take up both the bipartisan infrastructure plan and the budget reconciliation bill in July. Jenna?
All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson, thank you. And here now to discuss, veteran Washington journalist Ray Suarez. Ray, welcome. Let's start there with this bipartisan infrastructure bill. You know, the 2017 tax bill is a non-negotiable for Republicans like Mitch McConnell. Democrats want reassurances they'll be able to do reconciliation. It is a tall order. Can this bipartisan group of 10 senators get it done?
Probably not. I think a lot of people are going to walk away from the result of this sausage-making unhappy. There are some Democrats on Capitol Hill that are saying, look, we know our majority is a small one, but what's the point of being in the majority if you can't get your agenda passed? And so the much smaller Republican packages that have been proposed in recent weeks and the efforts to trim even now and leave the 2017 tax bill untouched are no-go areas for many Democrats in both chambers. This is gut check time. As the 2022 midterms are approaching, are they going to go big and do it through reconciliation? Or are they going to, in the interest of bipartisanship, always such an elusive goal, try to get something passed much smaller than what they're looking for, but with Republican help?
Yeah. To your point, we're all looking at 2022 and the midterms. If Democrats do decide to go it alone on this infrastructure bill, that could be very politically risky.
If it is still popular by election time, maybe not politically risky. There are majorities. If you look at pollsters' nonpartisan polls taken across the country over the last several weeks, the infrastructure plans as outlined in the first big Biden administration package and the idea of rolling back some of those 2017 tax cuts are both pretty popular, as is getting wealthier Americans to pay higher taxes. So, yes, Republicans will certainly go to war against a package they don't like if Democrats use reconciliation to pass it, and it's bigger than they want, and it rolls back some of the Trump tax cuts. But it's unclear where the politics are because the constituent parts of the Democratic proposals poll as very popular. Jenna?
Yeah, of course, inflation, a big part of that, too. Yeah, we'll just see where that goes. But let's talk about the Biden-Putin summit. Your overall thoughts, Ray, from what we saw today?
I look at this as a kind of get-to-know-you meeting more than anything else. The Russian president wasn't going to give on any substantial issues, and neither was the American president going to get any concessions of Russian bad behavior on the world stage, whether it's backing the Belarusian president in his recent hijacking of a plane in order to arrest a dissident, or the seizure in 2014 of Crimea from Ukraine, or an admission that cyber attacks were going on. So, yeah, they both said that they got along, that the talks were constructive. The disingenuousness of Vladimir Putin, comparing the men who stormed the Capitol on January 6th to political dissidents in Russia, just kind of shocking. Yeah. But that's one of those moments where you remember the audience for these news conferences is worldwide and not just in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something else, wasn't it? All right, Ray Suarez, thank you so much. We have to leave it there. Have a great night.
Good to talk to you.
Well, faith in America coming up, how the Bible is influencing life in the United States today.
Sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire. Monday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Thursday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Welcome back. Alabama pastor Ed Linton is the new president of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in America. Linton prevailed against Georgia pastor Mike Stone, winning about 52% of the vote. He's known for promoting racial reconciliation and dealing compassionately with sexual abuse victims. Described as a man of character and integrity, many say he is a bridge builder and would be pivotal in working to fix the racial divide in the church. Well, many American adults say they have a biblical worldview, but a new survey from the Family Research Council's Center for Biblical Worldview finds big inconsistencies on what that actually means. Only 31% of adults say it's very important for their faith to influence every area of their life. Among that number, 13% say they don't let their faith influence their politics, while 30% say it is a big influence. 55% say they really let their faith influence their personal relationships. 5% say they don't. President of the Family Research Council, Tony Perkins, joins us now for more. Tony, the disparity here is so interesting. What did you find most surprising about these findings?
Well, Jenna, what I found most interesting, only 6% of adults in America have what's called a biblical worldview, meaning we all have a worldview, all right? We all look at the world and analyze it based upon an understanding. As Christians, we should have a biblical worldview, meaning we interpret the events around us and respond to them based upon biblical truth. Only 6% of American adults have that. But what was interesting in this is 51% said they did have one, or they thought they had one. They didn't. But what that suggests to me is that they want to, they think it's important, and they admitted that this is something that I think I have or I want. So what it tells me, Jen, is that we've got work to do in terms of helping people, teaching people how to operate with a biblical worldview, meaning living out the faith as a true disciple of Christ. Now, here's the key about this, is that a worldview is developed really between the ages of 18 months and 13 years. So the bulk of building a worldview, a biblical worldview in this case, really falls to the parents. The parents have to be intentional about developing a worldview, a biblical worldview in their children.
Yeah. Tony, this survey talks about sage cons and how they let their faith influence their lives. Can you explain to us what sage cons are and how they play, the role they play in America today?
Certainly can. SageCon, spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives. It's kind of a new term. Well, about a decade we've been using this term working with George Barna, and it really kind of replaces evangelical, which has become kind of elastic. A SageCon is one who is engaged in politics or in the culture because of their faith. They're compelled to get involved. That's about 6%, I'm sorry, about 9% of the adult population are SageCons. That's roughly 30 million Americans. But here's a key factor or key fact about SageCons. In this last election, 99% of SageCons voted in the 2020 election. That's unheard of. And 97% of them voted for Donald Trump. In fact, they were almost 30% of Donald Trump's total vote. That says, and I think the left knows this is why evangelicals, SageCons, people who live out their faith are a problem for the political left, because they can make a difference. And so their goal is to try to discourage them from being involved and living out their faith. That's one reason we see these attacks on faith and religious freedom, the ability to live according to our faith and teach our children the same.
Yeah. Tony, just about 45 seconds left here. We know that church membership and attendance is on the decline here in the States. How much is that affecting these numbers in this survey and people who say they hold a biblical worldview?
See, I actually think it's the flip. I think the reverse is true. Is because our churches have not been teaching biblical truth, people have thought, what's the use? And so they've kind of drifted away. Those churches that are standing in the face of cultural opposition and preaching the truth of God are actually growing. So the message is preach the truth, stand on it, and watch things happen.
All right, Tony Perkins with Family Research Council. We will leave it there. Thank you so much, Tony.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
And we'll be right back with more Faith Nation.
Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family, and collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app, a great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Wednesday at 3 on the CBN News Channel.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
Democratic members of the Texas state legislature were at the White House today discussing a controversial Texas voting bill. The group made headlines recently for staging a late walkout, essentially killing the Republican-supported Measure for Now. While the GOP says the bill would help protect against election fraud, many Democrats say it's a way to suppress the votes of minorities. Vice President Harris today agreed.
What we are seeing are examples of an attempt to interfere with that right, an attempt to marginalize and take from people a right that has already been given. We are not asking for the bestowal of a right. We are talking about the preservation of a right. That is the right of citizenship. And it's that fundamental.
Well, Texas Governor Greg Abbott isn't giving up on passing the measure. He says it'll be a priority during an upcoming special session of the state's legislature. Still ahead, astronauts powering up the space station. Their maintenance mission next.
Are you suffering from feeling tired or worn out during the day? Can you not turn off your brain at night? You are not alone. Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, and I've partnered with the Christian Broadcasting Network, and we're gonna bring you some unbelievable information that you can use tonight to get a better night's rest.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Protect Your Sleep today.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living Tuesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. Whoa! It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man, come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Finally tonight, the International Space Station is getting an upgrade, leading 2 brave astronauts to step out into space. Expedition 65 astronauts completed their first spacewalk this morning, including NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough. Today's operation was part of a mission to install new high-efficiency solar panels on the ISS. It was the first in a series of spacewalks to re-energize the station by building stronger solar infrastructure. The next walk is Sunday. All right, and that does it for Faith Nation. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.